Hello, I'm Brent Stafford, and this is Aftermath of Murder Survivor Stories, a multi-part video series produced in support of the National Victims of Crime Week. Aftermath of Murder goes behind the headlines as survivors share their stories about the loss, grief, trauma, and the hope for healing in the aftermath of murder. Joining us today is Floyd and Karen Wiebe. Their son TJ was murdered by 4 people in 2003 over what the police describe as jealousy and greed. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Brent.
Thanks for having us.
Floyd, why don't we start with you and begin when you first found out that TJ may be missing?
My wife and I were at the cottage for a couple of weeks after Christmas. The last time we had seen TJ was Boxing Day. We were talking every day on the phone, and on January the 5th, he called and we had an amazing conversation. My son was involved in drugs and he was trying to get out of it. And the next day, we had arranged that he would go to Addictions Foundation of Manitoba to deal with that. And so we were ready, and my wife and I were ready to go home and start a new turn. And so we went home, and he wasn't home, and his shoes weren't there, and it kind of bugged me, like, you know, we just agreed that you'd be home. He didn't come home, and he didn't come home the next day, and he didn't come home the next day. We didn't find him for 5 weeks. And what we found out through the court process is that 4 men had sat around a kitchen table for days or weeks, we don't even know how long, planning his murder. There was a girl involved and a young guy involved. He was jealous that my son was hanging out with a girl, which was his girlfriend. That day, when we got off the phone with my son, he was called on the ruse of buying a car stereo. He phoned upstairs and negotiated the price of the car stereo, talked to this girl. Probably the worst part of this whole story is that he said to her, "Am I being set up?" Because he suspected something was wrong.
He had some kind of an idea.
He had some kind of an idea about something I don't know. And she said, "No, don't be stupid. Just go and buy the stereo and come back and pick me up." That was his best friend who betrayed him. She knew exactly what was going to happen. So these 2 boys got in the car, into TJ's car, and they drove several miles outside of Winnipeg. Somewhere along the road, they stopped and they beat him up inside the car. But they didn't kill him, so Anthony, the guy in the back seat, injected my son in the back of the neck with Drano. And they figured that that would kill him because they saw it in a movie, but it didn't. So he took a shoelace out of his runner and he strangled my son from the back seat. In fact, he pulled my son right over the front seat by his neck with a shoelace. I mean, my son weighed 200 pounds. And he said later on to a girl, "You have no idea the fear in TJ's eyes. It was unbelievable." But TJ still did not die. This is the second time they tried to kill him. So they took him to the farmer's field. They pulled him out of the car and stripped him of most of his clothing except a pair of pants and 1 shoe. This is Winnipeg, freezing cold. Threw him in the ditch. Anthony walked over to him and...
It's okay.
He jumped on his chest and he stabbed him several times in the neck and in the throat, or in the chest. And left him, and police found him 5 weeks later under 3 feet of snow.
Karen, what are you feeling when Floyd tells that story? It's tough for both of you. Why do you share so many details, Floyd?
I guess I share those details because people need to understand what we have to live with. I tell kids this story. I speak to a lot of kids in Manitoba, and Karen tells the story differently. She leaves that part out. I need it there, and I have kids coming up to me saying, like, I had no idea that people could do that. Normally I don't even cry when I tell this story, to tell you the honest truth. And today, it hit me because you never know what hits you.
Do you find that the same, Karen? You don't know triggers?
I don't usually talk about that because it's too hard to say, and it's too hard to listen to. As a rule, I'm very good at wearing a mask. And the difference between Floyd and me is that if I let my mask slip, it's very hard for me to get it back. He can let his mask slip and he can recover, and I can't as well. So.
And you both do so much work in this space, helping others. Still yet, this is a perfect example for everybody that you just don't get over this.
Oh, no. No.
There's no such thing as getting over it. It's 11 years. And it's still as horrifying as the day we found out. People say, oh, well, it gets less with time. Maybe your ability gets better to handle it. But it doesn't change the facts of what actually happened to TJ, and that he was our son, and that he came from us. He was part of my body, and somebody else did this to him. And what did they get for it? Almost nothing.
I remember the very first trial, the judge looked down before he sentenced Anthony.
So there was 4, let's just make sure we have this.
There were 4
killers.
people arrested for first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Ultimately, nobody ended up with that. The first person ended up with conspiracy, and for some strange reason, the jury also convicted him of second degree. Doesn't make sense. Plan a murder, don't plan a murder. The second one plea bargained to second degree. Both of those men got life in jail, minimum 15 years in prison. The third person was convicted of conspiracy, a hung jury on first. And he got a total of 13 and a half years for some other things that added. And the boy that wanted my son killed, the boy that knew my son, the other ones didn't even know him, he was acquitted. And when the first trial ended, I'll never forget it. The judge looked down at his desk. We had set our victim impact statements, and he said, no murder is explainable. But he said, in all my years on the bench, I've never seen anything over absolutely nothing. And I'll never forget those words because, well, I mean, they're pretty telltale of everything that went on.
So how does this make you feel?
I guess I have to say that my frustration and energy cannot be spent on these people that have done this to TJ because it can't bring him back. There's no percentage in us spending our energy, of which we have very little, to chase them down.
So what direction have you put your energy in to help other people?
Our small amount of energy that we have is spent, first of all, on our family, because we have 2 other children that we have to look after. But secondly, it is on specifically helping other kids to make safe choices to avoid drugs. We don't want to see another kid end up like TJ, and we don't want to see another family living our life.
And that's work being done under TJ's Gift Foundation?
Yes, this is my wife's thing. She came up with this idea, and I followed her with it, and we've changed a lot of lives.
I think in line with TJ's Gift even, and I'm not saying this is TJ's Gift because this is not TJ's Gift work, but Karen and Floyd Wiebe's work is also, when we find out that this has happened to another family, we feel so strongly that we have to reach out. And certainly we don't get everybody, but we try very hard to get in contact with the family because we know that there is nobody that understands what they need as much as somebody that has lived it.
No one can understand what we go through. No counselor, no psychologist, nobody, unless you've lost a child through homicide. And I feel that if I can listen to a person and that they know that I'm listening rather than telling them how they should feel, what they should do, it's therapeutic for myself and it's therapeutic for them. And you know, I think it's also pay it forward from one of the other people in this Aftermath of Murder series. Wilma Dirksen was the first person that I talked to 3 months afterward. And it was that connection that sparked me.
And obviously helping others is helping yourself.
Absolutely.
You know, Brent, one of the things that people forget is that murder victims, the actual murder victim like TJ, was a human being. And he was an accomplished human being. TJ was a fabulous person.
Oh, yeah.
And he made some bad choices, but he didn't ask to be murdered. And somebody took his life from him. And that is the case in every murder. Those people didn't choose to die. Other people made that choice for them. And I think too often that those individuals are lost in the shuffle. They certainly are through much of the court proceedings. And I think that we always have to remember that they're real people. And if there's anything that I hope people will think about, is that TJ had many, many more positives than drug dealing and drug using.
Even though there was some negative things said about my son and that he was dealing drugs, that was such a small percentage of him. I mean, what 20-year-old phones their mom and dad and their last words are, "Love you, Dad, kisses and hugs"? Not many, I don't think. And I don't believe that if I did not hear those words that day, that I could be a survivor of homicide.
If you or someone you know has experienced a loss through homicide, go to the Manitoba Organization for Victim Assistance website at mova.ca to find available resources and information on homicide support. If you are interested in volunteering or to make a donation, please visit the website or call the numbers below. This has been Aftermath of Murder Survivor Stories.